Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be checking out Darth Vader issues 42 to 45 by Greg Pak, Adam Gorham, Paul Fry and Federico Blee. In the wake of the Dark Droids event, Darth Vader joins the Imperial Schism against the Empire, beginning in issue 42, where Greg Pak reintroduces us to Enric Pride, a character first played by Richard E. Grant in Rise of Skywalker. Here he's just a lowly lieutenant in Z9 City 7, where, while compiling a report for Visor Masamida, the rebellion attacks and ends up decimating his forces. These aren't any normal rebels though, they're the Mar Corps, the machine-augmented rebels. These are some really cool looking new characters that we don't really know much about besides their augmented rebels. The Mar Corps capture Pride to lure Vader to Z9 City 7, and he is very well aware that this is a trap, battling the Mar Corps and the other rebels across a really awesome splash page by artist Adam Gorham that feels very reminiscent of that wonderful Vader Down series where Vader's just an absolute beast in a tank and just takes down everyone. Taking most of the damage, Vader gives his mouse droids time to deploy his new Imperial processors, which in between issues he has designed off of the backs of the stuff he got from the Scourge. So he's kind of refined the technology and made them so that they only work with him, and he is the only one who is able to control these droids now. The processors are all shot into the Mar Corps and it turns them on the rebels and gives Vader some new soldiers in his army against the Emperor. Taking Mar Corps was all part of Vader's plans as he carts them back to Mustafar and his fortress, where he soups them up with cybernetics and new armor that's very reminiscent of the Inquisitor armor. I like that there is a constant style here with Vader, and it's usually black and metal. There's some really great visuals in this part of the book, since Vader is depicted like a mad scientist, with him sort of using the Force and him sort of like raising his fists to the air. It looks something like a Dr. Frankenstein as he's bringing together his monster, and I quite like that. He's doing it over like this surgical room with all of these rebels undergoing procedures they don't want any part of. It's really terrifying and really cool. Vader's experiments are interrupted by Sly Moore, who is there to offer Vader a place in the Imperial Schism properly, so he may finally kill Palpatine and take power and bring proper order to the Empire. Sly, using her political know-how and appealing to Vader's lust for power, is a great way to coax Vader into joining the Schism, but it's also building off the stories Pak has been telling with Vader, where, the cracks are starting to appear in his visage of the dark side, and, he's starting to fall a little bit away from the dark side, but he's also trying to strengthen his bond to the dark side, so he's being pulled in a bunch of different directions, thus he is vulnerable. Even though he might not say it, people know that he is vulnerable, and I get the feeling that Sly knows this and is using it to her advantage. Issue 43 is a bit of a flashback issue as we get to see the formation of the main group of this Imperial Schism, the main leaders, if you will, with Sly recruiting Imperial traitors from the ISB, starting with Admiral Corleque, who let his Star Destroyer get overtaken by the Scourge and destroyed, killing all of his people and leaving him forced to breathe through a metal jaw. This happened during the Dark Droids event, and we know for a fact that it was actually Vader's fault for breaking quarantine and him willingly infecting Corleque's Star Destroyer. So I like that no one has questioned Vader, so they're just taking it out on this guy. Next we get Agent Febarian, who was present on Coruscant and saw the Emperor and Vader destroy some of the city to contain the Scourge. Governor Tantaza, another of Vader's recent enemies, is also recruited, and the final member is Council member Xanto, who embezzled credits from the Empire for over 10 years. Now at first, besides the Council member, I really like how each of these characters has a bone to pick with Vader and the Empire, and have suffered at Vader's hands in some way, or his master's hands in some way, whether it be in the path of destruction that he carves wherever he goes, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. One thing that they all have in common is that they are all victims of the corruption rife within the Empire, and Sly plays on that, offering them a chance to air their grievances directly to the Emperor, but none but Xanto take her up on the offer, and we're quick to learn that this is actually a test, and Xanto failed and is killed promptly. Sly does this to prove a point that they can't appeal their cases to the Empire since they will just be killed. They will be ignored and then killed or just ushered off to a prison. Sly brings on Corlicue, Tontaza and Fabarian and has them return to their lives, letting them fade into obscurity and out of the way of prying eyes of the ISB and the Empire, basically turning them into sleeper agents who will be called upon when they actually have a mission to go on. And also, I have to imagine it's also for them to collect information on, the goings on of the Empire and who their targets could be. Vader soon comes for the Imperial Schism recruits, firstly going for Tontaza, seeing as they have the most history of the new 3 agents. I do like that Pac is picking back up her story and her and Vader's fight, which was really kind of left unresolved, and gives them a round 2 here. Of course, Vader ends up winning and destroying Tontaza's armor again, but as it turns out, this is all just a test to remind Tontaza what will happen if she betrays them. It's kind of a way to keep them in line, kind of like how the Empire they're going against do. I like that there is still very much hints of hypocrisy rife within the Imperial Schism, because of course they will just be installing one evil with another, and I like that Pac doesn't shy away from showing that. There's this really great moment with Tontaza here, since while she fears Vader and knows that he can and will kill her, he knows he can't kill the Emperor, and she finds that kind of funny. Because of her bravery in the face of death, Vader allows her to join the Schism properly. The ties to Tontaza's arc early on in Pac's run don't stop there, as we catch back up with Kitster, Anakin Skywalker's childhood friend and leader of the town of colonists that Tontaza was ruling over. Kitster, we learn, is actually working with a cell of rebels who have taken over Tontaza's old death machine and have got it back up and running, ready to run some tests on it. The rebels assured Kitster that they are going to test it on an uninhabited, almost dead world just to see what would happen, and I love that Kitster and his people actually refuse to help the rebellion more than they already have, since they don't want anyone to have access to this, what is essentially a super weapon, even if they are using it on uninhabited worlds. Of course, it doesn't really matter, as Vader and Markor find them and kill the rebels and their general. I love the way Vader kills the general. It's just so unceremoniously, as the general's just opening a door and Vader is just behind it and he just stabs the guy. It's just so good. Vader wants the machine activated, and doing so wipes everything off the planet, the rebels outside included. Vader is doing all of this because he wants the condensed energy cells the machine outputs once it gathers all of the energy from killing everything. But we don't really know what exactly for yet. However, I'm assuming it's to power something very powerful and big. Since issue 43 was focused on Tontaza, issue 44 focuses on Agent Fabarian, who we see as a kind of an actual hero and kind of like a good man just trying to help the people of Coruscant in Sector 35 when the Scourge was attacking, and the Empire ends up blowing up the sector and he ends up being one of the sole survivors. Fabarian's opening parts of this book felt very sort of pedestrian and mundane, because we learned that he's no longer an ISB agent, he is a glorified parking officer, handing out fines and tickets, and he's just doing this as like a job for the Empire, and he's just trying to be a good guy as well, and the corruption runs a bit too deeply, as Fabarian puts out a fine for a Class A speeder, which at first we learn is a no-no. Those guys don't get it because it's a Class A speeder, but also the speeder was owned by Baron Slandarv, who treats Fabian like garbage when he summons the man, seeing him as just totally beneath him and just, part of the help, more or less, and all just for trying to find him. And it ends with him actually being fired from his job as a fine processor because the Baron, quote unquote, makes a complaint. Now at first we see that this kind of pushes the man further into the service of Darth Vader, as he ends up joining the Schism and now has fully decided to be part of it. Pac writes a great moment here between Vader and Fabarian, who bravely confronts Vader about his role in the droid Scourge, but Vader is quick to assure him that he is in control the whole time, and he was never actually part of the Scourge, he was controlling it, showing the agent that he has upgraded the Mars Corp with technology he got from the Scourge. We also finally learn what Vader wanted with the energy the Death Machine spits out, and that is to power the Mars Corp and Tortaza's armor and weapons, allowing them to fire powerful energy blasts. With the Schism assembled, they begin their first proper mission, and it's here we learn that stuff at the beginning with Fabarian as the parking officer was all a sort of ruse, as he was working as a parking officer and he gained the ire of the Baron so he could speak to him directly, and it was also he could run an auto slicer and hack into his secret files. The Schism learned that the Baron is making a new model of battle droid and he's keeping it a secret in order to maximize bargaining power when it comes time to sell them. Vader, of course, isn't one to just wait and buy something and decides to just take the droids for himself, breaking into the Baron's factory with the Schism. The issue gets super satisfying here as Fabarian gets to confront the Baron one last time when he tries to escape, and again gets a chance to be a good guy since the Baron plans on blowing up the factory, despite there being families living in the housing alongside of it. Fabarian kills the Baron and gets a badass action movie line about paying his ticket when he had the chance. What I like most about this is that we actually get to see someone who's an Imperial, but is actually a good guy. That's very rare to happen. I can only name a couple of people that has actually happened to in canon. People like Bodhi Rook or Galen Erso. And I like that Fabarian just wants to do the right thing and be a good man, and circumstances have forced him into this life he's in. And he wants order. He wants to love the Empire, but he's just seen all of the corruption thanks to the Baron and the jobs he has been made to do that he knows that can never happen without a drastic change. Gives him great reason to want to join the Schism that is offering that change. I'm kind of intrigued to see what Pac does with this character, being that I could see him joining the Schism and then realizing, oh, this is, just the exact same stuff with just new people in charge, and that could kind of jade his worldview a little bit. And I think that would be quite interesting. After securing the droids though, Sly Moore ends up passing out thanks to a disturbance in the Force, and later Zed confirms that she is actually tapping into the minds of the Markor, who are essentially trapped in their own bodies as the processes control them. So Sly can feel all of their hate and anger and everything inside of them, and it's causing great stress on her. Someone who just has latent Force abilities, so she can't imagine what it's like for Vader, and we actually get to see what it's like for Vader, and he just does not give a shit. He just does not care about their screams, and if anything, he's like enjoying it because it's kind of fueling his dark side. The anger and hate towards him is fueling him and making him stronger, which is what he wants. In a cool, if a little obvious twist, we learn that Sly Moore is actually relaying everything that's happening with the Schism back to the Emperor, and Vader also knows that the Emperor is aware of what's going on. And while that is like a very obvious thing for her to do, of course she would be. She was like the Emperor's aide, of course she's going to be helping the Emperor. I do love that it gives us more of that great game that Palpatine and Vader always play, the cat and mouse sort of engaged in some sort of big battle with one another, with the apprentice trying to overthrow the master and the master fighting back. It's stuff Sith have done for generations, and I like that we get to see more of that here. And I also like it that it's always painted with Palpatine just having such glee in it, like he's so excited that this is happening. And I always like it when artists paint him with that giant grin he usually has under the cloak. It's really creepy, and I just love it because I think of Ian McDermott doing that and cackling and everything. This is great. After relaying her information to the Emperor, Sly ends up meeting Lieutenant Pride again, who ends up joining the Schism as well, since we learn that he's kind of a bit of a Vader fanboy. And this is kind of an interesting turn of events, seeing that we see Pride in Rise of Skywalker and he is so loyal to the Emperor. So I'm wondering if this is some sort of spy for Palpatine, or maybe he's just kind of fits that classic Imperial officer archetype where he's a bit of a coward when the chips are down and stuff just starts going against him, so he just ends up siding with the Emperor in the end. Who knows, but I'm interested to find out. I think Pride was kind of an interesting character to include in that last movie and the supplemental materials, so I'm glad we're getting a little bit more about him. The Schism's plans continue in issue 45 as the group head to the storm-covered world of Tython. Pac uses the opening pages to develop Pride a little bit here, and it turns out, again, he's a big Vader fanboy, having seen him in action on Z9 City 7 and the impressive skill he uses to take over the Markorps. The book then spends a lot of time sort of just having characters talk, these 4 new characters that we've gotten introduced to, and they're just talking about why they are joining the Schism, what they think is order, what is not order, and I like how they all have differing opinions in order, but it can all agree that the Empire is the problem. I think that's quite interesting, and in a way that's kind of like what the rebellion is, because we have all of these different cells of the rebellion. We've got the stuff from Andor, we've got Saw Gerrera, we've got the traditional rebels with Luke and Leia and Han, all these different cells with all different meanings of like, what is a rebellion, or what is order, how can we bring that order to the galaxy? And I think that's kind of interesting that they've taken the long way around to doing a rebellion, and it's just a classic Imperial way of doing things, and I think that's really cool. Eventually they meet with Vader and Sly and learn that they are going to the Martyrium of Frozen Tears. Zed explains that the frozen mountain they are on contains a mound of pure kyberite, and they will be taking it, but first they have to deal with a trap the rebels have laid, because this used to be a rebel base, with the rebels having taken up refuge in an old Jedi temple, and they have seemingly laid traps for people who might want to wander in. Pride is put in charge, and like the good little fanboy he is, he follows Vader's orders to the letter, leading the group into the mountain to disarm the traps, and after evading them, Pride ends up finding the Kyberite Jedi confessional and activating it. Doing so forces Vader and Sly to see the confessions of generations of Jedi, and I really like how Pac sort of sets this up, where we see it from Sly's point of view, and interestingly, in a way she uses it to kind of gird the schism in what they are doing, citing the confessionals that she can see are barely anything, since the Jedi are just confessing things like, oh, they got angry, or they had to defend themselves in battle. Really, when you think about it, really small, inconsequential things, really human things, but because this is the Jedi Order who can't have attachments or emotions or anything, that's bad to them. And I like that Sly views that as like a weakness, like these people are so weak they think getting angry at someone is like a huge sin, and like this is the enemy we are fighting, who gives a shit about. Vader, meanwhile, is also seeing these things, but he also sees something extra, as we learn that Luke also went to this confessional during his time on Tython, and he left a confessional, and Vader gets to see that, and it's a really interesting confessional, since across the entire book, Pac has done so many little moments that show the dark side's grip on Vader kind of wavering, and this piece is probably the biggest piece so far, as Vader listens to Luke's confession, which he talks about being offered a place at his father's side on Cloud City when he got his arm cut off and learned that Vader was his father. And while Luke didn't join him, Luke has been thinking about it quite a bit, and thinking about maybe he should have. Vader hearing this shows him the vision Luke had on Dagobah in the dark side cave where he became Vader and cut off his own head. And it's at this moment Vader realizes that if his son follows him to bring order to the galaxy, then he will become a tormented soul like Vader is. After seeing this, Vader tells Pride and the others to take all of the Kyberite and blow up the temple. I like in these end pages, we get to see kind of Pride get kind of upset that Vader didn't like thank him for anything. He didn't get the praise he so desperately wants, and I love that the others are kind of making fun of him for that, and it's like, why, did you expect a medal from Darth Vader? And Pride kind of hits back with a really interesting take, and that is that he's going to follow Vader without question, because Vader himself is ruthless and righteous in what he wants, and there is nothing that will stop Darth Vader from bringing order to the galaxy. We as readers know there's something that can stop him, and that's his son. And I like how Pac and the artist panel this, where it's overlaid with Pride's text saying no one can stop Vader, and it's just flashes of his son, and I think that's brilliant. Across the arc, artists and colorists Adam Gorham, Paul Fry and Federico Blee bring their A game. Everything here looks wonderful, and they are able to capture the great lived-in feel of the original trilogy. The opening pages of issue 42 with the Rebel attack and the Star Destroyer in orbit crashing down onto the planet were fantastic, and it's definitely how you should open a new story arc, big action sequence. There are some minor problems I had though that didn't overall ruin the experience for me, like in issue 45 with the team on Tython. I couldn't really tell Fabarian and Pride apart, since they both look exactly the same in that they are both kind of middle-aged white guys wearing the exact same outfit. So it didn't ruin my enjoyment, but it made it pretty hard to tell who was talking about who without someone saying someone else's name. So there's a little bit of confusion there, but once you figure it out, it's good. And as I said, didn't ruin my enjoyment. There's still so much good stuff in the art department on these books. Darth Vader issues 42 to 45 explored the Imperial Schism and introduced us to a slew of new and returning characters, exploring what is order and what is the right type of order for the universe. Greg Pak continues to develop Vader's character in the most interesting ways possible, building on the movies and giving some meat to his turn from the dark side in Return of the Jedi. The book is entering its final 5 issues and a new story arc, and I can't wait to see what Pak and his wonderful artists have in store for us next. I am going to give these issues an 8 out of 10.